So yeah, I do see in the chat history that you did not record the last one.
Okay.
Oh no, you did 10/16. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Good
You
enough.
could have told me anything and I would have believed you.
Well, and it said that you were gonna pay me. No.
Yeah, that's right. double salary per month. Yeah.
So I wanted to bring everyone up to date where we are with AI in the district. I think everyone sees now in the news that AI is speeding up and starting to accelerate and take over the world. The robots are coming any day now, maybe for Christmas. But there's a lot of good, useful tools for AI. But we want to make sure that before we start embracing this 100% in the classroom, that we've done our due diligence. We've created an AI policy committee so that we can draft policy on how it's going to be in the classroom. And we've started to discuss what apps we might want to encourage as a standard in the district. You know, certainly there are plenty of apps that now have AI integrated right into them, and they're already starting to seep into our curriculum as they are. And we're discussing the different concerns that we would have. We have plenty of concerns about how AI might be used, how AI might be out of compliance with SIPA and COPPA, how student data and work will be captured and what will be done with that work. These are all things that we need to make sure that we're in compliance with. We have been meeting bi-weekly at this point, and our next meeting will be on December 7th, and we plan on establishing a survey to survey the classrooms and see how they're starting to take on with AI. And we also need to start forming a professional development plan, because we want teachers to be able to identify AI and know the best way to incorporate it in their classroom without having it be misused. But so far, things are rolling along fairly well. I think it's going to take us some time in terms of the professional development side, because that calendar is already pretty full, and the budget process will need to help support that as well. But we do have the ball rolling, and we know that it's coming, and we can see the good and the caution in it.
Great. Bruce, a couple of quick follow-up questions. I imagine that you're in touch with your colleagues who are in similar positions in different districts, and they're probably dealing with this issue as well. Is there any sort of collaboration between districts on developing policies that might be applicable, statewide or in this whole region that could be useful for us?
So are you familiar with Actum?
No.
Actum is a group in the state of Maine for educators with technology, and they're having a conference in Portland, and they're starting down that road as well. We have a Actum mail list, and they have a conference once a year in Augusta as well. And that's really where a lot of this started this fall. Was the Actum conference was at the Augusta Civic Center, and they had a lot of breakout sessions on AI activity. And so the integrators came back with a lot of enthusiasm and ambition towards getting AI rolling. But we've tried to make sure that what we're doing is laying the proper foundation first for it. But yes, I am in communication and monitoring the mail list as everyone else scrambles and tries to determine how they're going to corral it, because it is a wide open area. The concern that I have is our ability to I don't want to use the word control, but we have to be able to make sure that it's not producing inappropriate content and things like that. So I'm not trying to block it in any way, and I don't think that I'd be successful in doing so anyways. But we want to make sure that we're vetting the different aspects of AI that we're going to go down the road with in order to ensure that they're in compliance in that way.
Yeah, that's a great segue to my second question, and I'd like to actually ask you this first, and then turn it over to the committee or this group to weigh in a little bit as well. But what would be, let's say we develop policies, procedures, whatever it may be, guidelines, guardrails. What would be, how would we know that it is successful? Like, what would be the things that we would want at the end of the day, in terms of harnessing maybe the AI abilities, but also providing the right type of guidance for everyone in the district to use it properly? Like, what would that look like? And I'm curious, like, if you have particular thoughts of it, and I'd love to hear other people on this committee's thoughts, because I think I'm anticipating a huge tidal wave of change in terms of how this is impacting curriculum, how it's impacting pedagogy, and the day-to-day life of everyone in the district, really. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, and I'd love to hear other people's thoughts as well.
Well, I'd really like to know that our staff is in a position to identify what is AI generated. I think that we really need to have that corralled first before we really open the floodgates, if you will. But the floodgates are opening on their own, that's for sure. But I think having staff trained in such a way that they can introduce AI into the classroom that's in a productive, assistive way that doesn't take away the critical thinking aspect. I don't want to see AI become a tool that is replacing critical thinking. And I also want to know that teachers are capable of identifying AI content and being aware of how it's being used. I think that there's plenty of good ways to use it, but I think that there's also plenty of ways that could start generating shortcuts for students as well. So the staff preparation is really something that I'm concerned about and want to focus on first.
Great, thank you. What are other people's thoughts about this? What would a good AI policy have or not have, and how can we use this in a good way?
I'm going to say, in addition to what Bruce said, I think the policy should cover ethics in terms of the use of AI, and make sure that whatever we do, it's in a way that is inclusive of all students, even students from different cultures and so on. And that's in my research, that seems to come up sort of again and again as a question that needs to be addressed in any kind of policy. And I think AI is going to have implications in terms of instruction, and I'm not entirely sure how much of that we can address in the policy, but I do believe that we have a responsibility to the staff to do some decent professional development around the use of AI in the classroom. And I do believe it has implications in terms of instructional practice. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. What do other people feel?
I assume that it really impacts assessment, that eventually it's all about assessment, because AI is just going to get better and better, and students should be able to use it, in fact, to enhance their critical thinking. But in terms of assessment, it's going to be hard to know whether a term paper is written by the student or the machine, or both. But in-class assessments through presentations and blue books and, multiple choice tests on paper, I think assessment's going to be a big part of what staff figures out how best to understand the issue in students.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I've seen a lot about is about the impact on writing. That there's concern about writing kind of becoming obsolete as a consequence of AI. And so how to continue to engage literacy through writing literacy in particular seems to be something that's really important.
Yeah. I would add to that, Rebecca, and that when you're teaching writing, you're also teaching a way to think too, right? And if we lose that ability to write, then we're going to lose the ability to make connections in our own cognitive thinking and ways to problem solve. So That's to me one of the larger issues of relying on AI too much. Yeah.
Well, you know when I mentioned blue books, do y'all know what I mean by blue books?
Yeah, but I did think you dated yourself a little.
A little bit. I'm a little old now. But I'm thinking, and we just had a conversation last night with other teachers that you know, like 10 years ago we had a conversation on the board, like, you know, handwriting will become less important because of keyboards and computers. Now I'm thinking the ability for a student to come to class and generate an essay of some kind on their own with a pencil and a blue book is going to be rather important. So literacy continues to be important. It's, again, I think for Stephanie, John, and everybody else, it's going to be about how do we properly assess what a student has learned in maybe middle school, but certainly high school, and then of course college and grad school.
Yeah. Jesse, I'm sort of curious to hear your thoughts on this and any conversations you'd like to relay from the high school and how it might be impacting the work that you do.
I don't know that I have a whole lot to add. You know, I think everyone's got a pretty good understanding of both the impacts and the challenges and advantages of using this. You know, like Bruce said, there can be some benefits to enhancing practices and certain things when used well. But you know, it goes into every other form of academic honesty and things like that we've dealt with. I mean, it's since the invention of Google, kids can Google math questions and they show up, and there's apps that do all these things. So, you know, this is going to be an evolving issue, and I think it's the PD comes in. How do we recognize that, but also how do we impress upon students the importance of academic integrity, and making sure that you are representing your own works and not trying to pass off somebody else's work as your own.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead, Rebecca. Sorry.
Well, I'd also add that, like, this isn't a direct micro consideration with AI, but one of the things that also has come across my sphere is the way that AI is shifting learning in terms of where the focus is. So if learning and education are focused on data and outcomes as part of what they do, how does that change and how is that impacted as a consequence of AI? Because if, like, for example, if I can generate an essay, then what are we teaching? Like, in the face of AI, what is education in the face of AI?
I mean, I think it puts it just reminds us that process, especially in the writing process and how we gather ideas and formulate those ideas over time into a coherent thought and not just the product, of being the real important piece of the writing process, where a good piece of writing is never done.
Amen. Somebody who's
but
also,
it's like all those things that we're doing, how are we thinking, how are we changing ideas, how are we being more clear, you know, how we gathering supporting evidence. It's like, it's all these pieces. So, and those are the pieces you can't really recreate with AI, not well. And if you're teaching these things and doing interactive work in class, you know, so I think it's going to be mindful of us not only recognizing those things and pressing upon students the importance of academic integrity, but also as educators, us thinking about how are we teaching in ways that we can also stress the importance and highlight the importance of the process.
that speaks to Brad's piece about pedagogy too.
Yes.
Like, where it'll shift how we're pedagogically oriented in education potentially.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to be a good writer, you have to have well-developed higher order thinking skills. You have to be able to synthesize and analyze and research and draw conclusions. And so I don't think that piece will change. The thing that I think will change is the ability to gather and organize information. And that's why I say instructional practice could very well take advantage of what AI can do. I think what we can't do is say, now that we've got AI, we don't have to teach all these other skills. I absolutely resist that idea. I do have a quick anecdote though, and this actually happened to me, and this is some of the pitfall of AI. So I have no problem writing whatsoever. as a writing major in college, written at the graduate level for quite a long time. But we had a problem of practice that we were supposed to produce. It was 500 words or less on your problem of practice. And mine, of course, was AI. Well, after I went to the MSSA conference and listened to Dr. Daggett, I decided to make a Claude account. So I went in and duly made a Claude account, and I decided to give Claude my problem of practice. In 35 seconds, I had a 500 word or less problem of practice all written. My next mistake was to read it. I wish I'd never had. Because then all I could do when I sat down to write mine, obviously I wasn't going to turn in the one I got from Claude. All I could do was think about what Claude wrote, and it hemmed me up world without end from writing my own content. It was bad. I mean, I had to literally start from scratch and kind of put it away and try to forget what I'd read, because what that AI gave me was pretty good. You know, it really was. It was pretty good. So I don't know what that means, except that I don't think I'll ever do that again. You know, but I can see that you're better off using what you have. I mean, I'm very comfortable writing, but if you're not, I can see why it would be a temptation to use that tool. But having looked at all kinds of student writing over the years, including at the college level, I don't think there's going to be a huge problem being able to tell whether your student wrote a piece, or AI wrote the piece. Just my opinion.
But John, there's a particular AI program that you feed it things you've written, then it learns how to write like you and sound like you. So, we've got to realize that writing is going to be happening through all different sources, and especially AI. We just do. But I know, like with my students in grad school, I told them, use AI and use it well and learn from it. But when you come here, you've got to present, and you've got to write things. You got to write things, in class. And so it's just, especially presentations. But anyway, it's something you guys will figure out. But it's, Bruce, when you started, you're saying it's taken off and it's exploding. I mean, exploding isn't even a word to describe it. It's more than exploding. It's just in leaps and bounds every couple of months. So we're on for the ride, and we'll be fine. We'll be absolutely fine, and students will be fine. We just have to figure out how to use it.
Well, I think what you said, Lauren, use it well is going to be really
Absolutely.
but
Use it well.
understanding that there's the potential to use it not so well, or to have it be damaging, and that's where we need to sort of figure that out. I'm wondering if go ahead.
And with all the malware and phishing and things that are going on in the world today, AI is going to increase the participants in that behavior as it automates it for them. And being on our toes and being able to identify is going to play a big role in this.
Absolutely. Bruce, you had mentioned you're meeting with your committee or task force on this every couple of weeks. I'm wondering if at a certain point you'd be willing to present to the board on some of the key findings or some of the process, because I think the board is interested in this topic, and I think it'd be useful for us to know, like, what sort of work or progress you're making in terms of creating policy or guidelines or professional development or other things that you're doing as a committee. I think that would be if John and I'm sorry, if Lauren and Rebecca agree, to put that on the agenda.
Yeah, sure. That'd be great.
So maybe you could just think about when would be a good time to do that, Bruce, and I think it could be a really important conversation for us to have as a board.
I think that will take us a while, so maybe later in the spring or so, but we're really trying to determine where the fence posts go at this point.
Great.
Yeah.
Anything else on AI before we move ahead to the curriculum conversation that Stephanie's going to lead us in? All right. Thank you, Bruce. Thanks everyone for contributing. And I'm hoping that we can have other sort of future generative conversations like this. It's great to hear all the different perspectives that you all have on this. And I think it's really helpful. And Bruce, I hope that we can continue to have updates as well in terms of the work that you're making in this topic, because it is, it's changing so quickly. And I think we all have to, stay up to date with what you're thinking and what you're learning along the way.
So that was pun intended when you said generative discussions, because it is generative AI we're talking about.
Pun unintended, but thank you. Stephanie, would you like to lead us in the next part?
Sure. I am really just going to introduce Jesse Barkey and Mary Ann Guyson. Part of why we have them on the agenda to share with us, they're going to be sharing some of their vision of a graduate work, which is incredibly important work. It's a component of NEASC, but one of the reasons I think it's incredibly important is because it starts to get at what we want our graduates to know and be able to do. And in our conversations about pathways, we want our students to be prepared to be lifelong learners and be prepared with all of the skills that we think are essential. And oftentimes, I think that goes beyond just looking at content areas. And I know that's a conversation Jesse and I have been having quite a bit lately as we talk about CTE schools and how to ensure that we're going to be abiding by the law of credits for CTE classes. Jesse has been doing a lot of work with Bobby Deachin locally on that. I'm jumping into some of their work and I'm doing some state level work on that as well. So I think that sort of brings us to the whole big picture of what do we really want our graduates to know and be able to do. So Jesse and Mary Ann, I'll have you guys take it from here.
Okay. Well, to make our vision of a graduate, we really just put all the stuff into ChatGPT and see what it spit out, and it made for a really quick and easy process. So, it's
well done.
I'll let Mary Ann talk a little bit about the process, and I'll share my screen afterwards because I am not a great multitasker. But we've been working on this really since last year, and really the goal of this is not only because it's something that's required from NEASC, because it'd be really easy just to meet the requirements. Was we just have to have it exist on a piece of paper that we can pull out when they come and visit. But we really saw the value in creating a real meaningful vision of a graduate, which is really supposed to encompass our philosophy and how we're going to connect our guiding principles and core values into our programs to ensure that all students are having similar experiences regardless of what types of classes or programs that they're involved in here. So that's really been kind of the focus of our work. Mary Ann is the head of our PLC group that has been taking on this task since late last fall, early last winter, and working through that. So I'll share the screen, Mary Ann, with it on there. Do you want to kind of walk through the work process and then we can walk through that document itself?
Sure. So the first thing that we did was trying not to reinvent the wheel. We started looking at, what other districts or other schools were doing for the vision of a graduate. So we pulled a lot of information from there and started making just what I'm calling umbrellas, like what are the basic skill umbrella that we're looking at. So like the first one, for example, is critical and creative thinker. So that's an umbrella. What does that look like for our vision of a graduate? And we had lists. We had a lot of lists. So basically a lot of our time was just narrowing it down. What was redundant? What could we merge together? And so the the group basically put together what our ideas were and took it to the staff. We had a staff workshop where we brought it out to our staff and then created smaller groups where they could go and just really have those conversations. What does this look like? And we've purposely left out anything that has to do with like standards or things like that, because they're going to get that, our English standards are going to fall into the English umbrella. So we don't need to repeat that within our vision of a graduate. That's part of our what we're looking at as a graduate. So, excuse me. So basically where we are right now is we have brought it to the staff. We're in the process of creating a document to go out to the students to get student input from. And then we are also in the process of wheeling it out to parents and community members to get their input from it. So that's where we're at in the process.
And I am having a hard time getting the document to share. I'm still learning Teams. I haven't had to share many things.
So I don't know what's the best way to get it to you guys, but basically we've got 3 different, again, I'm calling them umbrellas. The first one's called a critical and creative thinker. This is a student who engages in a process of analyzing, evaluating, and interpreting information and arguments in a systematic, objective, and rational manner. The student is able to identify underlying assumptions, evaluate evidence, consider alternative viewpoints, and draw well-reasoned conclusions. So that's our big goal, I guess you'd say. And then under that, we've broken it down to, we like the idea of using I can statements so that the students can say to themselves, I can do this. So we've got underneath critical thinker, 3 different subcategories. I can gather and use resources. I can analyze information and evaluate evidence. I can reflect on academic content, and I can express creativity. And then underneath that, we have a few like kind of ways that they can show that they can do that. Any questions about critical or creative thinker that I can answer?
And I put a link in the chat to get to the document since
Thanks.
I'm struggling technologically right now.
That's why he's in charge, because I'm challenged that way. And then our other umbrella, the second umbrella was responsible citizen. And that's a student who develops a moral compass, becoming increasingly responsible, informed, principled, and engaged in their own learning while considering their impact in their school community before launching into the world. And under that, we have 2 subcategories. I can take appropriate actions, and I can respect cultural norms. And again, underneath those, we have some more specific things of what that would actually look like. And then our third umbrella is an effective communicator. So communicator is an actively express and listen to thoughts and ideas, both individually and collaboratively, across a variety of formats and settings. And those, we're trying to keep it as small and compact as possible, just because you don't want to be overwhelmed with, a bunch of I can statements and just all that stuff. So we're still, again, wordsmithing that down the line. And, one of the things that we'd like to explore is, again, somehow can we merge things together so you only have a few bullet points versus a whole group of things, trying to make it compact and just straight to the point. And I think one of the goals that I personally have, and I think as a committee, I think we do too, is just coming up with that common language. One of the things that we run into in a classroom is that student that's like, well, why do I have to learn X, Y, Z? I'm never going to use this out in the real world. And so if we can take this vision of a graduate and some of this language and say, okay, maybe you're never going to do a lab experiment or you're never going to do this, but I can evaluate something. I can work cooperatively. I can look for evidence and find that in a science class, in an English class, in a history class, any of that across the board, and just have that common language that we can say to kids. It's not necessarily content, which is important as well, but it's the skills that you're getting that we want you to leave school with. Not that you can do the Pythagorean theorem, but you can do these skills, if that makes sense.
Marianne, I just want to dovetail with that because I think it's really important that the board knows. I think I was expressing it a little bit last time, but the guiding principles are required in the main learning results. The language that the committee has chosen aligns really, really well with the guiding principles, which are those critical skills. And Laura, I'm so glad you're here. Laura will recognize them because we have been calling them the 4 C's in our district previously. And they really all align around those guiding principles, which Jesse is part of the ELE or was last year, which is an educator's learning experience, We have a couple of staff members that are involved in that again this year, and I was involved in it 2 years ago. And we went around the state, we met different businesses and organizations, and all of them would agree that these guiding principles are exactly what we need to be preparing students for, these skills, as opposed to just these buckets of content areas. So I'm really proud of the district, and Marianne, great work on your committee for pulling this together.
Yeah, I would echo that in terms of this is exactly what NEASC would want us to be saying if they were listening in, and they're not. I'm not going to report back to them. But this is sort of the goal that NEASC would want to have an alignment between guiding principles and the vision of a graduate, and also something that you said, Marianne, I think really resonates with me, which is we want them to be usable, as short and digestible as possible. And I think one pitfall that I've seen some districts and some schools make is that they go a little bit too far in this direction, and then they can't keep teachers and students can't keep these essential qualities or vision in their head. In a certain way, I think we have to reverse engineer it. And I think your feedback from the staff or the teachers in particular is going to be really important. And maybe framing it in a way like, how can we create something that's going to be really usable? How can we create something that we'll be able to all, have visibly up around the school in a way that we can make pedagogical and curricular decisions around and think about what's going to be our priorities? Because if we can do that, and it's not just something that is theoretical that you hand off to NEASC every 10 years, but something that you actually use to create that shared vision, to create a shared understanding, that's going to be, I think, the overall, that will have an impact, and that should be our overall goal. So any way that you can get feedback from the staff, like, okay, we have the critical and creative thinker, we have the responsible citizen, we have the effective communicator. How do we frame that in a way that teachers can really use those three main categories and have an impact, how they develop a lesson and how they interact with students and how they think about prioritizing one part of the curriculum versus another. I think that will be really important.
And to follow up on that is to keep your messaging simple and consistent. So what, Brad, you're talking about, and it does help people have it, sink in deeper and deeper and deeper. Simple and consistent.
And one thing that we're really trying to do is create something so that the staff isn't feeling like, oh, we got to reinvent the wheel or we've got to do this. It's things that we do every day. We're just, labeling it per se, or just saying, we are creating effective and create critical and creative thinkers in all of our classes. It's just now we're being able to say to the student using that same language, these are the skills that you're getting across the board. So it's not like we're asking the staff to do extra or implement more things. It's stuff that we're doing every day. We're just kind of, shall we say.
It's a follow-up question, Marianne. So, at the board, we developed the goals of relationships for efficiencies and pathways like a few years ago. And do you think that can be or is incorporated into, for students and their vision of when I finish school, I should be great at relationships. I have a lot of skills, if they want to call it that, instead of proficiencies. And I've discovered what a pathway means. And maybe I've discovered mine at the moment, or a couple of them, or at least I know that I'm going in that direction. I know what it means. Do you think that can be incorporated too?
I think those skills that go on, sorry, Marianne, that go along into all those things, I think that's represented in here. As far as the skills, what does it take to have meaningful relationships? What are the skills that it takes to determine and create your own pathways, which could always be changing? Right. As far as meeting proficiencies, these are supposed to be things that are, we're keeping a growth mindset in mind, things that we're never going to reach the destination. We're never going to be like, yep, I'm as responsible of a citizen as I can be. I'm done. But we're always working on those things as well.
Yeah.
Yes. So for example, like under critical and creative thinker, some of the points that we had come up with were things like use technology media to find information. what does that look like? I know, for example, I've sat in on some history classes and I've sat on some English classes where we're giving these kids the skills, what's a good resource? What's a bad resource? What's, some place that we can go to that's reliable, things like that. So I think those are things, again, that we're already doing. And so that when they go whatever pathway they want, there are certain things, like I tell the kids all the time, you're never going to get away from reading, writing, and math. No matter what you go into, no matter what you do after high school, there's going to be some form of that reading and writing communication that you're going to be responsible for. And there's going to be some math involved somewhere, whether it's just simple adding and subtracting or more complex things. So I think by using these umbrellas or this vision of a graduate, we're just giving them more and more tools that they have to bring out no matter what they want to go into. So I think that's part of it, is, as Jesse said, it's a growing, changing thing. And, maybe we look at it 5 years from now, maybe we look at it, we revisit it every year and say, hey, how can we make this a little bit more relatable? How can we adjust this to encompass whatever new technology or new thought process comes down the line? How do we, keep our kids growing in that direction?
And that iterative process, I think, will be really important, Marianne. I would encourage you all to revisit this on an annual basis once you developed it. And I think that as you continue to think about how, we're changing and we're trying to prepare students for the future, those skills have to continue to be, we have to think about, where we are right now and where type of skills students might need in the future too, through that process. What are some other reactions or other thoughts about this from anyone else on this committee?
Well, when you come to a conclusion and a clarity, I think your next step, and this, but is probably more challenging, is to create nearly 100% buy-in of your staff. Because if it exudes and breathes and emanates from every staff person in their interactions with every student, it becomes the mindset, right? And I think that's, if I was you, I'd be thinking that's probably my biggest challenge. It might be relatively easy to come up with the vision. Well, how do we get all staff people to be like, oh yeah, that's what we do every day. That's where we are.
And I think, again, that comes from looking at things and saying, this is stuff that we already do. It's not like I'm asking you to implement this and that sort of thing. It's just being aware that what you're doing falls under that umbrella, that, creating a lab or creating a research paper or a social studies project or any of those things that they do on a regular basis, they're already doing these things. So I think that's going to help with the buy-in of that.
Yeah, and it's substantiating, creating more weight to the things that we're doing. So it's not just important because we're learning the specific skill, but this is why those skills are important, and embedding that into our curriculum and everything else that we're doing. From every part of it, having those common strings that run through it.
One of the things in this is that you're making the implicit explicit. And when you make the implicit explicit, what you do is you also give an opportunity for staff and students to recognize the multiple levels and layers by which they're teaching and learning. And that often isn't, that's part of the pushback that often is expressed is, what am I doing this for? Like, what is this? And that's on all levels, whether you're a student, whether you're staff. And so when you can bridge between the implicit and the explicit, between implicitly you're teaching critical thinking, but explicitly this is what it looks like when we name it, it's in there, you're doing it, then people have a sense of, oh, I'm doing the thing I care about, and I'm doing the thing that matters, and there's a name for it. And so it sounds like a really powerful way of being able to unify around this learning too.
And I think that. Oh, sorry, Lauren. I just wanted to chime in that this also gives us a lens when teachers have to make instructional decisions about what to prioritize. I think the state will never stop giving us a massive laundry list that we can absolutely never get through in terms of what needs to get instructed. But a couple of years ago, we took the guiding principles and we matched them up to, at that time, we were calling them graduation standards, and made a determination about which courses were matching up to those guiding principles already. And I think that's a really good method going forward for teachers and staff members to have in mind of what are the visions of a graduate, and how can I make sure that my curriculum is prioritizing these really important skills? Because teachers always have to make the decision about, all right, I'm running out of time. What do I keep and what needs to go?
I think that also that for all of you in high school, teaching high school students, and certainly younger ages, but mental health is a bigger deal than it was like, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. That adolescent mental health was certainly challenged before COVID and more challenged after. And so it's just a key part of what you're doing, because mental health obviously affects, engagement and success. So I don't know how or what you want to do in terms of vision of a graduate, in terms of mental health and how you phrase it and message it, but it clearly is a big issue for how students are doing and how they're going to be doing once they graduate.
And I think it's the Maslow and Bloom and how they work together, right? Like, so, we're constantly working on meeting those needs of mental health, making sure students have their basic needs met, so then they can meet these other parts. So I'm not sure it's something that needs to be reflected in here, but I think this is how they access these, and this is how they teach and they learn through these things, is by making sure that they have good mental health, they have good physical health, they feel supported. It's where the relationships kind of bridge into, because positive relationship with their teachers in their school are going to increase their ability to be more successful in meeting all these things. So that's where it all kind of melts together.
And their relational skills with one another, probably the biggest thing. And that's harder to teach, I think, in schools, but I think increasingly becoming a mandatory teaching. Like, we focus on relationships in our district.
Great. Other thoughts or other things that people would like to add? Go ahead, Stephanie.
I just wanted to mention, Lauren, I don't know if you've been able to take a look at the link, but it's in there. It says identify personal needs and support systems for both my physical and mental health. So I think that the work that the committee has done is pretty thorough. I think it covers a lot of those pieces.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? Any other thoughts? And I'm going to echo what I said to Bruce. I think this would be a great thing for, when you guys are ready to bring back to the board, especially if we can talk about that alignment that Stephanie was referring to earlier with the guiding principles, and make that connection so that the board has a greater sense of how these two things are working together. The vision of graduate and the guiding principles are working in a very coordinated way, and I think a very powerful way for our students. So I'll let you think about the timing for when that could work. It doesn't have to be obviously until you really feel ready to share something. And then Marianne, you did mention that there are going to be different groups that you reach out to. I hope that one of those groups is the board, so that we get some feedback in terms of their work as well, and obviously you can take our feedback with a grain of salt, but I think it would be important for us to weigh in on some of this as well, and it might be some useful insights along the way as well.
I think Jesse and I were looking at second semester, like mid-second semester in that area, being able to present it to the board or have some sort of that kind of timeline. I think that's what we had talked about.
Yeah, and how you guys are going to see it is because it's going to be incorporated into the updated graduation policies as well that we're working on too. So you'll kind of see how it fits into the big picture of all these things, and how we're going to have this incorporate our decision making on certifying requirements for students graduating from Oceanside High School. So you get a little taste of how the sausage is getting made, but.
No, that's good. I think we're all hungry for that. And
oh God, the metaphors and the puns.
And you had mentioned there's going to be a survey. Is the board going to have access to that survey at some point as well?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, right now we're just putting it, getting it ready to roll out for the students. And again, trying to get parents and as much community involvement as we can, recognizing the fact that, you know, that's an important part of our school culture as well, is community involvement and, you know, what they're looking at, what's it going to look like when they go out to get a job or to be a part of a community, what's the expectations from the community for some of these
Great.
skills.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. Well, we have about 13 minutes left. And Stephanie, you had one final agenda item for the after school and summer school budget. Do you want to take it from here?
Sure. And I will let Jesse and Mary Ann go because I know you guys have busy schedules. So thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks, guys.
And if anybody has any more questions or anything, there, you know, feel free to email me right here at the school. So if there's anything that you'd like more information on, be glad to answer that for you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
See ya. So I invited Laura Lapointe. Laura is our after school and summer school coordinator for the district. I thought that this was timely because I know that there is a budget meeting tomorrow night where the committee is talking about some big picture items. And I think I had mentioned to you guys maybe back in September that I wanted to make sure that we're circling back to after school and summer programming because Laura has done a fantastic job of helping us spend our ESSER3 funding. But as we all know, ESSER3 is going away at the end of September of next year. So September 30th, 2024, we need to have those funds spent down. And we will. And, you know, more on that piece, but we also need to be really mindful about what we want to do with our after school and summer programming going forward. And I am going to propose and heavily support from my end, trying to work after school programming and summer programming into the budget. If we put it into the budget, it would be done during a phase-in. After school programming this year is about $100,000, and summer programming, historically, it's averaged around 125 to 140,000. I would propose we put 140,000 in. But the nice thing is, this coming summer, we'll still go into ESSER. We have one more summer of ESSER. So we would need to budget after school program year one, so for next year's budget, and then add in summer programming for year two, which would bring us to that following summer. So sort of a phase-in component of that. So I just wanted to
Stephanie,
yeah.
I'm sorry. So summer programming number 2, is that in the next budget because our fiscal year ends June 30th? It'll be in the upcoming budget versus the one after that?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Yes. Yeah. So this coming summer, for the summer of 2024, will already going to be funded under ESSER 3. So we've got those funds earmarked.
Okay.
So I want to hand it over to Laura for just a few minutes to give you some highlights around things like attendance, and we've got a little bit of some positive news to share as well. And then I've just got some questions for board members to be considering.
Yes. So that was a really great segment for me to come in on, because I feel like that's sort of our focus of after school. Is I'm a huge, strong advocate of developing those, what we call in the business world, soft skills. So that's the things like critical thinking, communication, and those leadership skills and qualities. And that's like everything a business manager is looking for. If you don't know how to do something, but you know how to teach yourself something, you can go really far, especially with the age of changing technology and AI. And so being able to teach yourself and think for yourself and communicate are going to be skills that are even more needed going forward. That's just my 2 cents on all of that. I think it's extremely important. And after school, we have the 4 C's. So we have our critical thinking and our creativity and our communication, collaboration, and community. So that kind of fits right into that whole realm of starting from elementary and working them up through till high school with these same sort of skill building. But anyways, going through, I was going to put together a document and share it, but I don't know how to do that yet. So I'm just going to read off some facts. I'm going to leave out Ashpoint, TGS, and South School since they're sort of our elementary hybrid programs, and Cushing. OMS right now, we have, this year is my first year taking over sort of the OMS programming, so I'm only 2 months into this. It's a little new still. I don't have data from past. Currently, right now, we have 42 separate students enrolled, and that's 4 days a week, which accounts for about 14% of the OMS population. So it's a decent amount. The National After School Alliance shared with me that a strong attendance rate would be greater than 50% on any given day. And right now we're averaging anywhere from about 70% to 89% attendance with our programming, which puts it in a strongly attended, which means, and I think there's still room for improvement, which, I mean, there's always room for improvement, but I think that we are capturing a great amount of that middle school level. Our summer programming, we had overall 181 students, which was 18% of the K through 8 population. And that probably was a little bit higher because I didn't include the pre-K, so it was probably closer to about 20% of the school population. And so the way our programs work, I know that you guys are familiar a little bit with, so we have our in-district program and we collaborate with a lot of community partners. We do a lot with Herringut, with the Landing Place, all kinds of community support, the Strand Apprentice Shop. And because of these, we actually were chosen from the National After School Alliance as a case study for the Northeast as an example of successful after school and summer programming. And I do have a link I can share with you guys for that article that they wrote, and they chose our district out of, I think it was 6,000 schools overall, and they chose Little Rockland, Maine as its Northeast case study. And I think that says a lot about what we're doing and what we can do.
It does.
Yeah. I don't know what else you would like me to share. We have 12 clubs right now at the middle school level. I think most of what we need for funding is middle school programming. That's sort of our after school focus. Cushing is a much smaller program, so even if, you know, when we get to those questions about what we do with Cushing, it's really the middle school that's the after school focus, especially with what's going on in our town with our kids and getting them prepared for high school.
Well, I'll chime in because I know we've got 6 minutes and we're not going to figure this out in 6 minutes, but I wanted the board just to hear what we're doing right now, just for the historical perspective. 6 years ago, we received 21st Century grant funding, which provided us with free after-school programming for South School, the middle school, and the high school. It wasn't necessarily equitable across the whole district because it was only 3 of our 6 schools, but it was extremely beneficial to those 3 schools, and in particular, South School and the middle school. And Sarah Rogers did a phenomenal job planting the seed, setting programming up, and I think probably one of the best things for this district, which was establishing incredible community partnerships. Once we knew that we were receiving this large amount of ESSER funding, I talked with John, and Pete was the business manager at the time, and I said, okay, I've got some ideas around what we could do. I really want to make sure that we're going to expand programming, free programming at no cost to families in all of the other schools, for both after school programming and for summer programming. So the very first year after COVID, when we could, well, not after COVID, I don't even know if we're after COVID right now, but the very first year when we were able to be back in person, we offered summer programming through CARES funding, which was ESSER 1 at the time, and it was incredibly successful. And then we hired Laura to take over that summer programming for the following year, and also to work on implementing after school programming for the other 3 schools, which were Ashpoint, Cushing, and Thomaston Grammar School. At that time, COVID was still going very strong, so it was very challenging to get staff to staff all of those schools. Laura ran the Thomaston Grammar School program. We partnered with the Y to run Ash Point program. We paid for families to be able to make use of that. And then we were never able to get programming at Cushing. This year, we did not apply for 21st Century grant funding. There's lots of reasons for that. I won't go into too many details, but I'm happy to address any board questions in the future. But I think the short answer is the federal funds are incredibly challenging and don't necessarily make a lot of sense for the way that we want to run our programming for our students. We really want to focus on those 4 C's, not just discretely math and literacy. And there's a lot of things that are tied to those test scores. So we have continued after-school programming. When Laura talks about the hybrid model, we have after-school programming available at Ash Point, Thomaston Grammar School, and South School. It is a paid program through our partnership with the Y. Laura offers some enrichment learning opportunities for students that are in those programs, and the Y offers subsidy. There's state subsidy for families that are not able to pay, and we do have some families that are taking advantage of that. And then in Cushing, Laura is running supporting the programming that's running in Cushing. Cushing is free of charge to parents for this year because we were not able to offer it for previous years. This year we have the staff to make it work. So we're honoring that non-payment for programming. And then the middle school, we know, especially based on data, it's incredibly important to have programming at the middle school because it's really all enrichment. Parents would likely not pay for that. They don't need it for childcare, but we know how important it is for our students. So that is fully funded and at no charge for families, and we're continuing to offer transportation for that as well. We know as a district we cannot do it all. We cannot fund it all, which is why the partnership with the Y is important. But the questions going forward, and this is what I'll type up and send out to you guys, because this is what the board needs to consider. Do we continue to fund Cushing going forward, or do we explore other options? And there are other options. There's the Langley Preserve and library programming that have some considerations around some after-school programming. We have also bused students in the past from Cushing to Thomaston Grammar School to take advantage of the Y after school. And we could also look to run it as a paid program, and we run it ourselves, but we're charging families a fee to help us sustain and not just have a budget impact. But to do that, there are some childcare certifications that we would need to do. The Y takes care of that, which is why it would be a couple of additional hoops to jump through on our end if we were to run that program. But we have looked into that, and we know what it would take to do that. We did not pursue that path. I just want to add this piece. We didn't pursue that path for this coming year. For one thing, the Y was looking to expand, which was great. But another piece of that is it's going to take some work on the business office end to have programming in which we're accepting funding. And we just did not have that capacity at the end of this year and into the early part of the summer. So that's question 1 about Cushing. Question 2, do we continue with district funded OMS programming, including transportation? That's question 2. And question 3 is, do we continue to fund summer programming to the same degree, which is currently $140,000. That pays for all of the field trips, all of the supplies, all of the staffing for our 5 schools, K through 8. We talked last year about charging families a fee to do that. Ultimately, we waived that because we were able to still encompass all of that into ESSER. But we have had lots of conversations about sustainability going forward and what can the budget support, and what might we need to be asking families to support.
Thank you, Stephanie.
You're welcome. I'll type those questions up and send them out to you guys.
Yeah, I think we probably need to wrap up because we're running out of time, but I'm wondering, this seems like it's a broader board conversation as well, and particularly has budget implications, and I think it would be important at some point for the board to have a better sense of the impacts for the after-school program and the summer program. Laura, you talked about those soft skills. I completely agree with that. I'm wondering if there are ways that we can capture what those soft skills are or what the actual impacts are, so that when you present to the board about this funding, you can say, here's some anecdotes of what the students have learned, and here's some feedback from parents, here's some feedback from our students, here's some feedback from our staff. This is what the program has meant to them. I think that could help create a narrative that the board would be able to understand. I mean, I'm a big fan of the 4 C's, but they're kind of abstract. But if you hear it coming from a kid, like, hey, I did this and this is what it made me think, or this is how it influenced the way I go about my day, or influence the way I study, or interact with my friends. I think those are things that the board could really understand and really, hopefully support. So if we can find a time to, according to the budget cycle, and I'll leave that to all of you to determine the best possible time to make that presentation to the board, then I think we can make a more informed decision about how to support this program going forward.
Before we end, can I just say one thing? So I wonder if there's a way also to get that information from that article disseminated more broadly, because part of what we're doing too, if we're going to talking about a budget, is we also need to get, like, we're taking it to the community. And so if we have data that shows, hey man, 6,000 for the Northeast, we were highlighted. I think that's really important that we get that seen in the broader community, whether that's in the paper, something too.
Absolutely. Lauren, does this make sense to you in terms of next step?
You said me or Laura? Me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it does. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
All right. Well, I'll let you guys coordinate in terms of the agenda, but Laura, thanks so much for presenting and for leading this after school program and summer programs. We really appreciate it. And
yeah, thank you.
You know how important it is for the students.
I love it. I love doing what I do, and I wish I could literally measure how effective what we do is, because sometimes it's not as easy as being, but I can tell you that I already know that I've got an army of middle schoolers for next year, because I have all my 5th graders are ready for after school next year. So we're sort of kind of working our way up through the grades, because they're all excited.
Good.
They're like, wait, you do what? And like,
good.
Like, oh yeah, you didn't do after school program next year, right? And they're all like, yeah, of course.
Well, that type of story is one measurement, absolutely. And so more of those types of narratives, I think, could really help us understand the impact that you're having within our district. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. All right. Well, our next meeting is on December 18th, 3:15. And Stephanie, Bruce, and I will work on an agenda. Maybe we'll touch base at the beginning of December to sort of formulate that. In the meantime, thank you all for joining us tonight. And sorry we went over by a few minutes, but really good conversation. And I'll report back to the board on everything we covered today.
Great. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Take care.
everyone.
See you next time.
Thank you.
Good
Thank you,
bird
Laura.
day.
Afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.